Hey, and welcome to another episode of Making the Right Play. I'm your host, Ishi, with my co host.
Mane.
Today we have another special guest on the show. Please welcome Dayan. How's it going, Dayan?
Hi there.
It's good. It's good. It's going good. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad, as good as we
We're
can
doing
be
okay.
with everything going on.
So like, I don't even think I have spoken to Ishira about this, but like Dayan used to be like, and still is like a mentor of mine, and also like he used to kind of train us through like the MUN sessions we had in at Lyceum because like the Lyceum ecosystem was so trash and we didn't really know how to navigate ourselves to the MUN arena, and that's how like I really got close to him, and then with time I think I was always very interested in just like what he learned in school and just the decisions he made when he was kind of like going to university and whatnot. They're very smart decisions, and at the same time it was very different to the norm because he always did what he wanted to do, and he focused on like the learning process of things because a lot of people kind of get caught up in like the gimmicks of like going into university and whatnot. And I think like the path he took to university is like quite interesting, and I think a lot of people could learn on like how to prioritize that learning process over just like aiming for just like all these arbitrary goals. And that's why I wanted to kind of invite him, and I think all his experiences would be very like fruitful for discussion. So yeah.
I'm going to add on to that and say, the way I got to know Dayan was through MUN because, we had this very passionate history teacher who made me do MUN, and he was like, oh, like I was going for my first conference. Like, I joined, 4 weeks before the first conference that I went to. Right, and then I didn't even know what a foreign policy statement was. Like I started with like Dayan and like a bunch of other ideas in our MUN group, and they kind of mentored me through the process, and yeah, that's how I kind of got to know them, and yeah, like just like Manat Dayan's been a mentor to me, and yeah, it's awesome to have you on the show. But so that I know that you've been somebody who had like a very like unconventional college experiences, right? Because you went to a liberal arts school with
Mm,
where they didn't have a concept of a major, right? Usually, like people apply to
mm,
specific programs or they get into the school in general and they work in they like study a certain program or concentration or a major, right?
mm.
But with where you went to school at Quest, it seemed to be like a different thing, right? Because you would get a BSc in science and what was it called again?
So Bachelor's of Arts and Sciences.
Arts and
So
science,
it's a
right?
double major, double degree. Yeah.
Right. And then you basically you do like a core curriculum, right? And then you would concentrate in something, or you pick a concentration or something like that down the line.
Yeah. So what usually happens is you declare this thing called a question. It's like this kind of like a research question that guides you, and you self-structure your final 2 years. So your junior and senior year, and you pick your own undergraduate classes, and you kind of like design your own degree in that way. So you pick your own concentration classes as how it goes.
Okay,
But yeah,
that's interesting. Like,
Okay.
yeah, I remember like when you first like went to uni, went off to uni, you were telling me about like you were going to study like epistemology and that sort of thing, philosophy, and then I know you did that for a while, and then you kind of like found this other interest in kind of data
mm,
science and stats and that sort of thing now. And I think that's kind of the direction you're heading in now. And I know that you've been one who's like, always had like kind of shifting interests and things like that. So like, how did that kind of program like become conducive to that kind of nature? Because I feel like, a lot of us like will get into specific programs at certain unis and we'll be stuck
mm,
there and we'll be thinking, oh, I really want to do this, but like they don't have the option to do that. Uh,
yeah.
and yeah, like how is that whole thing conducive to like the fact that you had different like shifting interests over that period?
Um, I think for me, how it happened was it wasn't really any kind of directed approach. If I remember most like the direct moment, I remember it was my one of my physics professors who said, if you leave a liberal arts college without learning how to code, then you've completely wasted our entire education. And that really stuck with me because I was like, that makes no sense to me. But and then I spent the years trying to unravel what he meant, and I don't think I still have quite understood still what he meant. But for me, how I got to it was I was trying to answer research questions, and then I realized a certain number of those questions could be answered well with obviously with research. And then it's the kinds of research you do in the arts and the social sciences, which is like purely qualitative. You read your books, you go through, you spend hours and hours on it, and then there's a bunch of research that can only be done quantitatively, and this comes with programming, right? It comes with good coding skill, it comes with good quantitative skills. But then the problem is usually you pick up just the tools themselves and you don't quite understand why the tools work as they do, right? So even with doing, let's say, majoring in a science, we usually understand like, yeah, so the science is good and the science works, right? But we don't always understand why the scientific method is why we use
Yep.
it. And I think for me, it was a curiosity as to why the tools work the way they did. So I wanted to dig more deeply into the tools. And that is what led me from going into philosophy into more data science and taking a bit of like mathematics as well. Because I took like linear algebra, calc 3, I took some data science classes here and there mixed with philosophy. So for me, it was really about trying to understand the method of knowing itself. So it was like a long, drawn-out course on epistemology. Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and I was. This is just like a question I had from you. I feel like a lot of people who want to like do things that are a bit more related to science or like are very STEM heavy, choose like the traditional kind of like university kind of path. Like if I'm as far as I've seen, like what are your thoughts on that? Because like I guess we could just discuss just the way our programs have been like structured. Do you think people could have like the same amount of success when taking like a liberal arts kind of approach to something STEM heavy in comparison to like going to like a general university kind of like program where they have like a major and minor kind of thing.
I think it really depends on where you are at. I feel very few people really know what they want to do by the time you're heading
Okay.
into an undergraduate degree. And a lot of people usually get to the undergraduate level, you are in there for like a few years, and then you realize maybe this is not really what I want to do. It may be what you are still interested in, but it's probably not what you want to be doing, right? Or maybe there are a certain number of skills that you wish to acquire that a certain degree can't provide you, but that's the degree you need for an application in a certain field. And I think I've noticed this these days mostly with, and you probably noticed this as well, a lot of there's that line in engineering, for example. Let's say, I think around 3 years down the line, you have to decide whether you're going to specialize. I think the both of you probably would have this like decision as well. Manit, you're probably there, like where you have to decide whether you're going down the project management path or whether you're going to further deepen your engineering skills, right? And you realize a
Yeah.
lot of people do study engineering, physics, or whatever, just so they can get skills that will transfer them into a career in like quantitative finance or trading or things like that. So I think there's two ways to go about it. It's like really why you have to ask yourself the question of why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, like we can ask Ishira, like Ishira, why did you do physics? Like you do, like what you do, like a double major in physics and engineering, is it? Ishira,
Sure.
Ishira.
Unfortunately, with that little Wi-Fi glitch, they lost me as part of that conversation, and we also ended up losing about the next 10 minutes of audio. So just my response to what Dayan said, yes, I do. I am majoring in physics, and it is mostly because I'll pick up skills that I can apply in different contexts, and for example, in computer science or in conservation. It's just that quantitative aspect that really thrills me, and its applicability is awesome. So that's kind of why I do it, and Diane is on the right track there. Coming back to the whole audio issue, we did end up losing the next 10 or so minutes of Dayan talking about some really cool stuff, including his journey at Quest and his interests and how he got into them. Uh, Fortunately, we did retain the chunk of audio that we thought was that carried the most important part of the message from this podcast. So keep listening. Diane, if you're watching, sorry about this. It was a Wi-Fi glitch and everything, but the important part's still there. So keep listening. Zencaster started. Yeah.
Cool. Um, yeah. So Dan, I was just curious as to how your journey was in terms of research and like specifically about the research that you've done with regards to like development and like just towards like social good and whatnot. Like because I feel like what you mentioned over the years is that you like working in like developing countries and diving into problems around those areas, and you've also worked at a few firms in like Sri Lanka, kind of like giving back to those companies and whatnot. So I was wondering like what your journey was like to kind of get into research, and how would you advise someone else to go about it if they want to, address social problems with an angle of research.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the way I see it, there's two kinds of writing. If you actually want, if you're not in industry, and I think I realized at an early point, industry was not quite my thing,
Yeah.
and I would not be able to quite work an industry job, and I would prefer work that I actually enjoyed doing and
Yeah.
take having my time to solve problems, even if it is working for a nonprofit. I'm not sure whether I enjoy working for nonprofits as much as I used to before, but I think for me the main takeaway is that there's two kinds of writing you do, right? There's the kinds of writing in your field that helps. Experts make decisions, right?
Correct.
And B, there is the type of writing that distills technical content to the layman that helps them make better decisions. Now, if you're talking about for the voter, this is especially true for fields like I think journalism and social policy. You are charged with journalism was traditionally charged with communicating problems of the polity, whether it was understanding technical economics, understanding how government works, how the law works, and developments in these contexts that may be shielded from the eyes as a result of technical obscurity, distilling the problem to them and giving it to them so that they are making more informed choices. And I think for me that was why I like to get into it, because as much as I enjoyed doing math, as much as I enjoy coding, for me, I still enjoy being a writer, and communicating the
Okay.
research is one of my favorite parts, and communicating it very clearly, which is why I got into it. And that was why when I started working at Verity, I think I started interning there in 2018, and I kept going there I think each year after, and I did work there partly full time as well. And I never saw myself quite working in that field at all. But when I did join there, and I saw the work that they did, it kind of drew me in because all their work is geared around tackling a certain problem. Especially so in their context, it's in the context of the Sri Lankan polity. For example, are Chinese loans actually bad? So to the layman, Chinese loans are automatically bad because Nair debt is bad. Just like you view it from the perspective of a household, that debt is in itself bad. But this again obscures from the larger problem, which is not bilateral debt. It's not Sri Lanka's real problem. Sri Lanka's real problem is international sovereign bonds, which is commercial debt, which you only got access to, I think, closer to a few years after the end of the war. And there were not any real restrictions on the access we got to capital markets, like commercial capital markets. So obviously, I won't name the regime, but the regime at the time obviously had unlimited access to the capital markets, and they thought they were having a fine party. And as we have seen now, the music has to stop at some point. You can't just keep borrowing money from capital markets because these are private lenders, And I'm getting carried away, but the point here is,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of nuance, especially in economic topics, that gets obscured from the layman because of its technical content, and people tend to make fast judgments on these things. And for me, what drew me to that kind of research was helping people make better judgments on these things, because it helped me make better judgments, and I realized it was a useful way for my skills. So what I would tell you is, if you're trying to break into research, identify what you're good at it, and particularly if you're trying to get into research, the most useful skills are attention to detail, obviously, having a brain for like analytically distilling a problem, simplifying it, and then communicating it are the most valuable skills, I would say. And obviously don't do it if you don't enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all good, like some good points. It seems like you're asking like mainly like qualitative questions, and you're trying to get in like get at it from like a quantitative point of view, right there. Am I wrong in saying that?
uh, I mean, no, I think partially that is part of it. And for
Okay.
me, the added advantage is that I bring the quantitative side, sorry, to the table,
Yeah.
whereas a lot of researchers have either one or the other. And I think this is a bit of a disadvantage, especially in today's world. I think you need both tools to be able to make sense of the problem, because it's a
Okay.
holistic
Yeah.
problem, and one does not follow without the other. But,
Yeah. 100%. And like, yeah, I just want to put my 2 cents out there on like how I got involved with research, because I think a lot of like, I don't know, at least a lot of like first generation Sri Lankan students go into college and they're not really aware of what research is, which was, that person was me. Like I didn't know what research was and what academic research was. I thought it was for like, oh, like the super geniuses of the super geniuses, like the people with the 4.3s that get involved in research. And you know, like I was glad enough to have roommates who are educated enough on like the whole process of doing research in my freshman year, that they were, they kind of walked me through like the whole process. And like what they said was, find like a professor who like looks at like who's studying a topic of interest to you. And to me that was dark matter, right? So like at the end of freshman year I was like, oh, like I had completed like my like mid to intro level physics courses, right? And I was like, okay, like now I can get started in research. And I like cold emailed a couple of professors, and one of them who's working on this really interesting project, he replied to me and he was like, yeah, we can take you on for the summer. And then I was like, actually, can I start in the spring, and I'll take, do like research. And like, so like that whole process, I feel like that whole process of like reaching out to professor, just cold emailing someone, is something that a lot of us just like skip out on, even if you have the opportunity to do it. A lot of us actually don't know that that is a thing you can do at research universities. And I highly recommend doing academic research at some point in your lives. So like definitely, like even at least in your first year, just like reach out to someone who's studying a topic that's interesting to you, and just like, you know explore it. Even if you're not going to stick with it, just do a summer of research, do like 1 quarter of research. And really, like do that. And then from there on, like you can establish relationships with the people in that lab, with your principal investigator, with the professor, and so on and so forth. And those things are way more valuable, and you can eventually end up picking topics that are more interesting to you. So like initially when I got into research, I worked on like this step. So we have this like krypton removal system, that we basically have this xenon gas that goes into our dark matter detectors. And that xenon gas is contaminated with trace amounts of radioactive krypton. And pulling that out to the required, like removing krypton to the required like cleanliness, essentially, is insanely hard, because we want like 1 part in quadrillion, like cleanliness, right? Which is kind of insane if you think about it. Like we're removing gas from gas, that's like really hard to do. So we have like these huge gas chromatography chambers. But like my first few quarters of research were just like working on a piping system, right? And like you wouldn't think that is heavily involved with like doing physics research, right? I was literally working on like a gas pipe system, right? But like it was interesting, because like you were picking up all these like skills that people take for
Yeah,
granted, like
exactly.
knowing
Yeah,
how to
exactly.
solder, and
Yeah.
knowing how to weld. I feel like if you go and work on any particle physics projects, and and on the first day they're like, oh, do you know how to solder? And you say, no, I don't know how to solder, right? You're just gonna look like a
Yeah.
fool, right? And like
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen to some people. So like
Yeah.
uh like don't be that guy. Just like take the small tasks and like build yourself up. So like I
Yeah.
started with like yeah, I started with building like insulation for like a piping system, and then I built the piping system, and then I like moved to a stats project later on. Like, there's so many avenues to do it, and I think like just like
Mm.
getting your foot in the door is the biggest part of it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think I would definitely agree with you. I think maybe if I get don't correct me if I'm wrong here, but like obviously, like a lot of us look at it research first as like it's like it's not quite the bed of roses we imagine academic research to be, especially when you're starting out. And I think a lot of us or don't see it, as a lot of us young ones don't see that there's a lot of work that takes to getting to even like
Yeah.
a level where you're like be
It,
able to start. Yeah.
yeah, it's really not that easy to like just imagine like you're trying to like, okay, so like when I went in I was like, oh, I'm going to be working on dark matter, right? But like then I saw the people that were actually working on dark matter, and these are PhDs who spent 6 years studying this
In
topic, have
labs.
published some of the best papers in the world. If you think you're going to get to that level
Yeah,
like just by getting into college, like no, that's not how it works. You won't get there for another 10 years. But
yeah,
like start small, right? Like there's no harm in it. Just like the relationships you build, and like the small contributions you make to bigger pieces of work are more valuable than you
mm,
making you
yeah,
getting your own project on its own, right? Like yeah, I definitely
definitely.
think that you've got to know where to start, and once you do
Mm,
that, you can just work it out from there 100%.
I think
yeah,
that's the same with even like a general like career out also, like it's literally the same thing. Like you like this
mm,
is like I think like all of these like all these like glorious images, like these massive contributions you make, I think it's just sold way too soon. And I think having
mm,
the expectation, especially as like an intern or research assistant, might not really be feasible, I think. But yeah, I could agree with both of you on that.
yeah,
um
definitely. Yeah, you have to be willing to do the grunt work and
yeah
spend like a few years actually doing it. Yeah.
yeah
I have one more interesting question for you that we ask all our guests.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like, bear with me and hear the whole question before you respond. Uh, yeah, okay. You don't have to get that close. But anyway, okay. So the question is, if you could lick the foot of anybody in the world,
Mm.
dead or alive, fictional or
Mm.
real, who
Mm.
would it be and why? Oh, you can also gain their power, which is an important part of the question.
So licking
Yeah.
their foot
I would be
gains
really weird.
power.
Not just. So
You're
the
looking
purpose.
to gain the power. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wait, what? I didn't hear you go cut off. Huh?
Okay, so you're licking the foot to gain their power.
Okay, and what do you mean power? Like normal human means what kind of
Define it
power?
as
You mean
whatever
like-
you want. Political
Like
power,
politics.
superpowers, skill, whatever. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Shoot, that's a good one. I mean, I'll give you two. I mean, shoot, it's hard to pick just one person. But yeah, I mean the easy answer I would naturally go to if I could lick anyone's foot. I would just stick Gauss's feet right in my mouth. You know, Frederick Gauss.
Like Gauss, the
Just
mathematician. Okay.
absorb mathematician. You know, get his brain and
Yeah.
absorb all that. math. Just like I'll eat his foot off. You know, forget licking it. I'll like suck his toes and to get an inch of that mathematical skill. Truly gifted mind, unlike any other. I know a lot of philosophers, mathematicians, you can say, you know, they were product of the time they were born, but Gauss was truly exceptional.
Yeah.
And if I can add a second one, I'll say James Franco. I'll give him a light lick because I really admire him. It's his skill
Light
set.
lick. Okay.
It's like a question. Like a question about
so let me be clear. You're licking James Franco's foot just because you like admire him, not because you want his power. Or anything.
No, because I want his skills. You know, James Franco is still a genius. Yeah, I want some James Franco.
I thought you were just like
Just because I want that was a. No, don't make me answer that question. But yeah, no, James Franco wouldn't mind as well.
Okay, that was the most interesting answer.
Yeah. I think initially it was Isuru's, and then like now, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this
What did Ishira say? What did Ishira say?
The guy from Peaky
Okay,
Blinders,
what's
what was his name?
Cillian Murphy.
Oh,
Murphy.
silly Murphy. Okay, that's just purely sexual. So I don't even
Yeah.
Bro, I can't believe you pulled Gauss out of the history books for this.
Yeah, that was nice. I like it. Yeah.
Gauss has been pulled off everything. Might as well pull him out for this as well. No.
Yeah.
Manit, I'm definitely interested to hear Manit's answer. But wait, you must answer this a few times already, right?
No.
We've never asked this ourselves, so that's going to be the last.
Yeah, I think the last
This is
episode.
just
Yeah, last
for the
episode.
guests.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll let you know what I say though.
Yeah.
I have to think about that.
Just putting it out there, Gauss has made my life in physics very miserable because E&M is all Gauss's creation, and I have suffered greatly in my E&M practice because I don't understand anything. Anyway, that aside, Dayan, that's the end of the podcast, and thank you for coming on, dude. This has been fun.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. Good to see you guys again. Definitely some interesting talking points. I hope y'all got what you wanted, and I didn't rant or ramble too much about the wrong.
No, I think it was great.
No, it was nice. Yeah.
Okay. As long as that's good.
Yeah, and to all the viewers who are watching it this far, thanks for getting this far, and we'll see you on the next episode of Making the Right Play. I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks for listening to another episode of Making the Right Play. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, Content. This will keep you posted on new episodes, bonus content, and blooper reels. We hope you make the right play.